So let's get to the topic of this evening's session. Let's return to our sense of smell. And I thought I would start by reading you a piece from two books. I'm going to start with Ann-Sophie Barwich. So she says, "Smell is the Cinderella of our senses. It has acquired a remarkably poor reputation throughout history. Traditionally dismissed as communicating mere subjective feelings and brutish sensations, the sense of smell never attracted critical attention in philosophy or science. Until now, I might add." And the other companion book which has come out this year is this wonderful book by food writer and food scientist Harold McGee, Nosedive, A Field Guide to the World's Smells. And Harold says, "Despite its long-time reputation as one of our lowest human faculties, smell clearly has the power to engage us with the world around us, to reveal invisible, intangible details of that world, to stimulate intense feeling and thought, and to nudge us into being as fully and humanly alive as we can be." So a suitable topic for the Being Human Festival. Now, the sense of smell is a wonderful way of connecting us to our immediate environment. We often are reminded of the wonderful smell of a forest floor when we're out for a walk in the countryside. We can recreate the smells of something that's absent. Harold McGee points out that green tea seems to smell of the seaside, and I think that's a very good observation. And smell also connects us to memory. We often catch a scent that we haven't smelled for a long time, and it takes us right back to our grandmother's kitchen or to the house of a friend or to a holiday. So these odors tend to come with vivid and emotional experiences, and they can be locked away for quite some time. Smell is also important in our attraction to others. We're aware of finding people incredibly intoxicating sometimes just from the way they smell. And equally, there may be people we find very pleasant, very agreeable, nothing wrong with them. But if it doesn't happen to be an odor that we can get with, they don't smell right, there's nothing we can do. So smell connects us to all of these things. And finally, before I bring in my guests, I want to remind us that smell is not just used for the external world, but it's also an intimate part of our internal experience of assessing the foods and drinks that we put in our mouths. So smell contributes a lot to what we call tasting. Now, to explore this for yourself, if you followed the instructions, you should have a jelly bean. And I want you just to hold the jelly bean in your hands, because you'll need two hands for this. With your other hand, pinch your nose tightly closed. So this is as though you're going to plunge your head under water. You really need no air in there at all. Now, if we all do this together, pop your jelly bean into the mouth. Start chewing. You'll get some sweetness. Some of you some sourness. Now release your nose. And then I hope for many of you, you'll feel rushing in that complement to sweet or sour, which is the flavor of the jelly bean. It's only when the nose is involved that you know if it's cherry or pineapple or strawberry. And that means that all of those flavors, strawberry, peach, mango, melon, they don't come from the tongue. We don't have any melon receptors on our tongue. They come from our sense of smell, from the odors rising from the mouth up to the nose. So smell's contributing a lot to everyday life. It's an unsung hero of lots of our experience. But now I want to explore what happens when smell goes missing. And I want to bring in our first guest, Chrissi Kelly. So Chrissi, if you could switch on the camera. Good evening, nice to see you. Welcome to the Being Human Festival.
Very nice to see you, Barry, and thank you for having me as a guest.
Pleasure. Now, as I said, you founded the charity AbScent, which is one of the UK's two charities that deal with people who have lost the sense of smell or have smell disorders, the other being fifth sense. But AbScent grew out of your personal experience, and I wonder if you would tell us a little bit about what happened and how you suddenly experienced a world where there was no smell contributing to it.
Yes, well, it all happened in 2012. And like many people who have lost their sense of smell with COVID-19, I caught a virus. And when I recovered from that virus, I woke up one morning and my sense of smell was just gone. And the loss was profound. I had no smell signals whatsoever. And it was very distressing for me. I had always been someone that was very attuned to my sense of smell. So it came as a shock. I went to see the doctor, who didn't really reassure me that much. And of course, I had very severe loss that took a good 2 years to recover from. So during that 2-year time, I had terrible parosmia. I had great difficulty eating.
Tell people what parosmia is, if you would.
Parosmia is the distortion of smells, and it appears to be a phase of the recovery. So from what we know and what we understand is that when the olfactory nerve is trying to regenerate, it may not be able to deliver a complete signal. And when that happens, you will be presented with an odor, but your perception will be distorted. And for most people who have parosmia, these distortions are extremely unpleasant. I would say they range on a scale from unpleasant to excruciating. And for some people, it can be so bad that all normal smells that they would come into contact with make them even vomit. So it can be a very, very disrupting kind of experience to have. Luckily, I was not that bad.
I can see why having these disruptive smells, especially if they're, unpleasant, jarring, sewage-like smell, awful, that's bad. But I wonder if you could try to convey to people, you said that having woken up without any smell signals was a profound loss. I think a lot of people don't understand what's meant by how profound that is. Could you say something more?
Here's the strange thing. It was not, I was in shock in the beginning, first couple of months, but the profoundness of this loss, the alteration of my experience in the world I was not fully aware of that for a couple of months. I always I stress this when I talk to people, the depth of this bereavement that I had experienced was not apparent to me for about 6 months. And that's when I really bottomed out. And I felt as though my experience of the world was just two-dimensional. I didn't feel that I could communicate. I just felt utterly separated, like I was floating above the world and not really in the world, but just looking at it. And I think these are sentiments that I've heard people try to express over and over again. No, I mean, and I've been in this game now for 8 years. I've never heard anyone deliver an explanation that is so beautiful that I say, yes, that's it 100%. It is almost impossible. I would say it's impossible to describe because it's so elemental to who we are, our perception of self, and our experience of the world.
I think that's beautifully put. I've heard many people who undergo this sudden loss of smell or a quite persistent loss of smell saying they feel they're behind glass. They feel they're cut off. They don't feel comfortable in their own home. They feel alienated from their own home. And I think what that's bringing to light is something that only when it was absent did you realize that smell was a lot to do with connecting you to your surroundings, making you feel at home.
Absolutely. Without a doubt. And I mean, just think about the fact that this is a bereavement. And now ask yourself what you do when you're feeling a little bit blue. You will probably reach for something that smells good, whether it's something lovely to eat, or you might have a bath, or you might put your arms around someone that you love. All of those things have a deep layer of olfaction in them.
Mm.
And without that ability to self-soothe in this bereavement, you are then doubly bereaved. I felt that loss, that inability to soothe myself, to relieve my pain, very, very difficult.
I think that's putting it in a very sharp way, in a crisp way. It's almost as though we don't know what we've got till it's gone. It's the loss of smell that makes you appreciate smell. I thought we might ask people in our audience watching how many people have suffered some smell loss or smell distortion. And I think we have a poll that we can put out. Yeah, here we are. So have you experienced the loss of your sense of smell? Yes, no, not sure. If people would take a moment to answer that. And we already have in the Q&A, Tanya has said that I lost my sense of smell from COVID since March, which is only returning for some smells and taste. I try to do essential oil smelling. We'll talk about that in a moment. But it's hard to keep motivated with it. Water tastes horrid and I don't smell sweat properly, as examples. I think this will be very familiar to you, Chrissi.
Yes.
And so 31% say they have experienced some loss of smell, 63% no, and interestingly 6% not sure, because it's actually quite hard to assess our own sense of smell, I think.
That's true. That's very true. Can I just say a few words to Tanya here?
Yes.
I think we'll come on to smell training a little bit later. Yes. But what she says is water tastes horrid. And we are hearing this a lot, that there is something in tap water that people are finding very, very difficult to manage. We don't quite yet know what that is. We've had one suggestion. People say, pour some water into a jug and let it sit on the counter for a couple of hours. That can sometimes help solve that problem. And the final thing that she says is that she doesn't smell sweat properly. And I'll tell you something funny. In our Facebook group, which now has a lot of people in it, I put in a post the other day and I said, tell me about your experience of bathroom smells, fecal smells, body odors. You know, what do you have to say about that? Well, within a couple of hours, we had 450 comments. Wow. It's a very hot topic. This amongst people who have lost their sense of smell. This idea that they can no longer smell themselves, get feedback from their own body is very, very troubling. And I mean, one of the things that, of course, that happens is that body odor smells very strange. And so, Tanya, what I want to say to you is you are in there with all of us. We hear you, and that's what you describe is not peculiar in any way.
Yeah, and Daniel says, my daughter lost her sense of smell for 3 weeks in March, presumably COVID, and then everything tasted of vomit for a couple of weeks.
Yeah, yes, yeah. Yes.
So I'm glad to see it's through. I mean, we have seen in our recordings in Chrissy's Facebook group and also on Twitter, I have seen people saying, I thought anosmia was bad, where I had no smells at all, but pyrosmia was far worse. That's they talk about a lot of food and coffee smelling like fruity sewage. It's disgusting. And of course, that means that eating is very, very unpleasant. And it's something that you struggle to do. So I think this is, you can see a lot of people talking about this and bringing it up. I'm going to ask Chrissi to say something though about what we can do to help. And I think perhaps the positive thing is that, as you said, it's part of the recovery maybe to have parosmia, that although things are now smelling, some things are smelling distorted and bad, it does mean there's some sort of regeneration of the olfactory receptors connecting, maybe misconnect or miswiring, but something's going on. So you have been a great pioneer, as I know, of trying to help people with smell training. So perhaps you'd say something about that.
Yes. Well, I discovered smell training in 2014, and I felt a bit skeptical because what I was told about it is that I should smell these 4 essential oils and smell them twice a day, and that was going to help me improve my sense of smell. But right away, I thought to myself, that doesn't seem logical. If I can't smell anything, that I should be asked to smell something. So I started reading about it and over the years became very interested in it, tried it myself. I became fascinated by it. I think that's fair to say. I started by keeping a diary and noting meticulously what my experiences were. And because I had such terrible distortions when I started smell training, these things that I was training with were not very pleasant to me. But I noticed that my sense of smell was improving, and it did. In fact, that was borne out by my sniff and sticks tests that happened further down the line. And in 2015, I was lucky enough to be able to attend Thomas Hummel's. Oh yes, thank you, Barry. You're showing the smell training kit. In 2015, I attended an event with Thomas Hummel in Dresden. He wrote the first paper on smell training, and that was kind of my introduction into the world of smell training and smell training research and so on. So smell training is recommended by the British Rhinological Society, especially for patients who've had COVID-19. We at AbScent have produced all kinds of training materials to help people understand what the smell training kit is, why it's made the way it is, how smell training should be done, and then how to manage the kind of problems that come up. Just briefly, you have these 4 jars with essential oils. Barry will now demonstrate. The good idea with the jar is that the jar has some blotting paper in it with essential oils. And when you put your nose to the jar, you are not touching your nose to the end of the essential oil bottle. People often want to smell train right from the tip of the bottle, and that's never a good idea because sometimes the essential oils can be quite aggressive on the skin. So that's why we recommend.
It's very narrow also. I mean, it's
very narrow. You have, excuse me, you have a tiny plume of odorant molecules coming out of the top. So with a jar, you have, it's like either you're going down the motorway with the window open or just open by a crack. So you get a much fuller experience from the jar.
Good. So people have I think it's worth saying this isn't just for people who have lost the sense of smell trying to recover or are suffering smell distortions on the way to recovery. Thomas Hummel and his lab in Dresden, he's one of the world's leading smell scientists and doctors. They did a beautiful study where people in their 70s were given smell training to do for 3 months, and the other group were given, control group were given Sudoku to do for 3 months. And after the end of this period, the people doing Sudoku were better at Sudoku, but no general better cognitive function, whereas the people who did smell training had improved cognitive function by external independent checks and measures. So smell training better than Sudoku. You'll keep your sense of smell longer, you'll keep cognitively more active. Try it.
And that group of people also had a lift in their mood. And I think that is, important to note.
Yeah, I think it is. We should also say that post-viral infection is one of the ways of losing your sense of smell, but of course, head injury as well. And someone mentioned this, I think, in the Q&A. Head injury, front-on head injury in particular, when you sever those little wires that go, as it were, from the little nerves that go up from the bridge of the nose through the cribriform plate here and into the brain. They can be sheared quite easily, a shearing of those connections, and then it's much more difficult to get anything back. So your corresponding figure in 5th Sense, Duncan Boak, had head injury, and with Carl Philpott, the NT surgeon, he has started 5th Sense. Some people are saying it's not so bad. I think after head injury, you're just glad to be alive. But I know for people like Duncan, he's gone on, trying to overcome the loss of smell and what that means. And so it matters. The other thing, of course, we know is that rhinosinusitis, persistent sinus problems can lead to loss of smell. So there are all sorts of ways this can happen, and we have to be on the lookout. I'm going to just ask one more thing, Chrissi, before we come to Anne, and that is the way in which smell comes back is not always all at once. It's piecemeal. So I guess it's important to keep smelling everything, isn't it?
Yes, and this is one of the things that I've noticed over the years, that people will start to improve, but because it happens so slowly, they don't recognize that, and they don't believe that they're actually recovering. I've been doing some research with Dr. Jane Parker at the University of Reading. We're looking at patients who have parosmia, and often when they come into us, they're several months down the line. So they might say, oh no, it's as bad as it ever was, and I haven't improved at all. And they will have had a sniff and stick score from their original appointment with an ENT. And what we'll find is that, yes, they've actually improved quite a bit, but they're not aware of it because it happens in such tiny increments. So we always recommend that people keep checking things on a weekly basis, go back to things that they don't think that they could possibly tolerate, and then have them keep trying, keep seeking smell in everything they do. And the recovery is very gradual, but in most cases there is recovery to a certain degree. It's very important to stress that, and very important that we keep people attuned, that they are aware of all the smell signals that they're getting. Because one of the problems, I think, is that when something smells wrong, people tend to tune it out.
Yes.
And what we want to do with smell training is bring them back to being alert to any kind of smell signal, and taking that on board. And then once they have, if you imagine that you're smell training with something and you get this strange signal that you don't recognize as lemon, that you kind of hook into that and say to yourself, this is the experience that I'm having from lemon, and try and build on that. And in that way, go back to it the next day and the next day and the next day. And it has to be said, smell training is not a quick fix. You have to do it twice a day for a minimum of 4 months. So in that respect, it's very like physiotherapy or stroke rehab. You've got to keep going back to rebuild these new neural networks. And over time, hopefully an improvement.
Hopefully makes a difference. The other thing I wanted to drop in here was that nice study again by Thomas Hummel and colleagues showing that people who do a lot of smelling and have and use their olfactory function a lot tend to be more agreeable on personality scales.
I'm not a bit surprised.
Smellers are more agreeable, so keep smelling everything. Use that sense of smell. Thomas said just the other week that even foul smells, everything, it just makes him so delighted to be using his sense of smells. I think that's a good thing to remember.
Yeah, me too. Agreed.
We're also just needing to talk about, it's come up in the Sarah's mentioned this in the chat or in the questions. There is some puzzle, and it is still a puzzle, and I'm going to bring Ann-Sophie in here as we start to explore this. There's a puzzle that people are often just not aware of how good or bad their sense of smell is. And that's made research on post-COVID smell loss very difficult, because we've sent out questionnaires and we say, how good was your sense of smell? How is it now? And of course, people have no idea often how their sense of smell was previously. In fact, there's almost an inverse correlation. We have people like my previous project administrator at the Center for the Study of Senses, Nisha Patel, who said to me, I got a terrible sense of smell. And we said, okay, let's test you. You can test people objectively. You can see at what point an odor becomes detectable and their threshold. You can see if they can distinguish two odors. You can see if they can name odors. And she was the top of the leaderboard of our scoreboard of how well people smell. So she was good. And other people say, oh, I've got a very good sense of smell. I'm always aware of all the smells around and lots of smells I don't like. And we test them, and it turns out the sense of smell is average or below average. So there's this funny inverse between how you think of your sense of smell and how accurate you are. So accuracy and awareness don't pair up. And Ann-Sophie, if we could bring you in here at this stage, we're going to now talk about some of the science of smell and how it's informed your philosophical thinking about what smell is like for us. But someone has asked, why is smell the Cinderella of the senses? So maybe we could start there.
That's a very good question. Well, first of all, thanks for having me. And the answer to the question is very simple. Well, it's the neglected sense. It's always been at the bottom of people's interest in the senses. It's always been considered to be not relevant to understanding particularly human cognition. So yeah, of course, animals use their sense of smell, but they're primitive and they're just brutish and they're instinct driven. But we rarely think about the sense of smell as informing our way to think about cognition, the sophistication of cognition. And this is where the Cinderella comes from. It turns out there are many more senses, of course, as just interoception, proprioception, that have been equally neglected. So the sense of smell is much more even now an opening door to bring in the kind of multiplicity, the multiverse of the senses. But smell, of course, since the philosopher Immanuel Kant actually said, you know, it's a dispensable sense, it's ungrateful because most things smell bad anyway. I give him that when it comes to New York and the subway, but he also ignores a lot of good things, like a lot of the things that actually smell rather pleasant, and also the richness of experience. And as Chrissi actually already explained, the depth of material experience you get through this kind of subliminal sense. So that's the answer.
That's a wonderfully full answer. I mean, it is true that the parlor game, when people say, if you had to lose a sense, which would it be? They often say, oh, smell. Wrong decision, as Chrissy's saying, because of the profound sense of loss we feel. But I'm wondering why science, especially sensory science and neuroscience, why until recently, why it's been neglecting the sense of smell so much.
Well, there's actually three answers to that. The first one is it's the hardest sense to study scientifically for a long, long time. For the very simple reasons, how would you measure smell? How would you put it into art? How would you objectify, turn it into a scientific object? It's not that easy. And as we heard before, people's introspective judgments, like I feel I smell well or I don't smell well, isn't really pairing up with their capacities, their abilities. So how do you can't just rely on people's reports. You have to find a good scientific measure. That was one issue. The other issue is that the receptors in your nose were actually only discovered in 1991. So in April next year, we're going to have our 30-year anniversary of the discovery of the olfactory receptors by Linda Buck and Richard Axel. So kudos to them.
Who got the Nobel Prize? Who got the Nobel Prize for this?
In 2004. So it was a fairly big achievement because they didn't just simply discover the olfactory receptor family, but these turned out to be the largest multi-gene family in the mammalian genome. So this is like big. And it turned out to be kind of a molecular gold mine for scientists. And the third reason is actually, well, you might think, okay, great. So we got the axis now, the kind of interface between the air and the brain, and we found out a way to measure smells. Yeah, that still didn't solve it because it turns out smell works different than vision. There are lots of things quite different when it comes to not just simply our vocabulary. We talk about objects of perception, but a lot of the ways in which we talk about smells doesn't really fit the visual paradigm. We don't talk about the directionality of smells. In visual objects, makes absolute sense. In smell, not so much, but also the cortex itself is organized differently than vision, than audition, and then somatosensation. So we need a better and a new theory of perception that's built on all the senses, because theories of perception are not just simply theories of vision.
Right, and that's beautifully put. And I'm thinking that in the case of vision, we might think, what is the job of vision? Well, it's to give us a kind of presentation of the three-dimensional objects with distance and depth in our visual field, so that we can navigate them. You sort of think, well, there are things out there, and we have to represent where they are and what shape they are, so that we can move around them. But if we start that same process with olfaction, you think, well, there are chemical compounds out there, and then there's smell. So where are smells or odors? Are they the chemical compounds? Are they just our subjective responses to it? How are we, I'm going to be very philosophical with you now, how are we to figure out what odors are and where they belong, where we locate them in the world?
So this is where I would say the most important part to recognize is that it's not just chemicals. I mean, to reduce smell to chemicals is really to say, you know, Hemingway is just words. That's kind of a very reductive view in a way that doesn't explain the behavioral relevance, the qualitative dimensions, and also to understand how we arrive at our perceptions. There is something in between, which is the biology, the psychology, and this is what we need to understand, because the variation we often have, and you know that yourself. So when you smell something, when I smell something, we might evaluate the smell differently. Or you yourself, depending on how hungry you are, things do smell different. So the point is that this is not simply subjectivity, something that's a whim of some kind of issue you might have, but that doesn't have any causes, but rather it's variation, and we can find out the causes of that variation. That's what we need to understand, the causal mechanisms that are hidden beyond the layers of variation, beyond the appearance. So to get philosophical back at you, reality and appearance, and we focus too much on appearance, we should go to the reality.
Yeah, I'm with you on that 100%. I also, but appearance is a good guide, because we know we're interested in these special experiences that are experiences of smell, the ones that go missing when Chrissi first discovered her anosmia. But I like the story, because I think you've got the chemical compounds, and then you've got the biology that responds to them. I mean, you've got to have our biology in there, because I take it there's no chemical definition of what makes a molecule smell like anything.
So we have acquired a rather in-depth understanding of molecular features, often responsible for certain perceptual features, but we don't have a from the chemical to the odorant stimulus response model. This is unlike vision. This is unlike audition. And one of the reasons for that is, as I mentioned, not just simply an irregularity of chemical structures. You can have some chemicals with completely different, and I really mean completely different structural features, similar perceptual category, and vice versa. Chemicals with very, very similar structure having completely different smells. So there's an interesting irregularity here. And this is one thing, like we don't really have a good chemical classification system in relation to odorants, but quite often that relates also to the biology. For instance, it's not just simply that we have to find out the right structure in order to find the right categorization. We should start with a categorization, because it's not just simply that you have one molecule and one feature. No. So one quality, but quite often one molecule and a varieties of qualitative perceptions. Yeah. So quite often, my favorite example is, for instance, androstenone, which is a pig pheromone, and it does more than just pigs smelling sexy to each other, but it also actually can be perceived by different people differently. So androstenone to some people smells very unpleasant, actually. So like body odor.
Like other people.
Yeah, it's like it's not nice. For those people, they're like, oh, this is disgusting. Other people say like it's also disgusting, but it's more like urine. Again, not a really pleasant thing. Then other people find it pleasant because it's kind of woody, and other people find it floral, also pleasant. So we are not just having different hedonic qualities, pleasant, unpleasant, but even different categories: floral, woody, urine. Yeah, and body odor. So this is where
some people don't smell it at all. I mean, there are people who just miss out on androstenone, and again, we should point out some of the individual differences. People can have specific anosmias. There are some sets of smells they just are missing. I have a good friend and colleague and collaborator who shall remain, Charles Spence, who is anosmic for TCA. That's the compound in corked wine. So Charles couldn't tell a corked wine from a corked hat. I mean, he's just impossibly blind to it. And when we discovered this, we were saying, you can't smell that. We gave him the badly corked wine, and we ordered another bottle, which was fine. And we kept presenting them blind. He thought they were the same. At first, I thought it's just because he was brought up on all those badly stored bottles in his Oxford college, which they think are interesting, but are really a bit too funky. But no, he couldn't tell. Also, Catherine Dacremont in Dijon, another food and wine scientist, can't tell TCA. So we can have these absences, and it's important that we say there's a biological reason for that. But one of the questions that's coming up, and I think we should address it now, is like most things about humans, there's a mixture of biology and culture. So some things are due to culture, some things are due to biology. What about any gendered claims about smell, and what about any differences in cultures to do with smell? Can we talk about that a little? And I'm thinking of Asfa Majid here, of course, but also if we just talk about the regularly made claim that women have a better sense of smell than men. Any truth in that?
Well, there are studies showing that women smell better, and I actually mean the sensitivity to smell. I leave the judgment about the other part to everyone else. But yes, there are actually sex differences when it comes to sensitivity to smells. There are also age differences. So something is not just simply different forms of gender or sex, or however you want to define it. But when it comes to biology, there are differences. Then there's the age difference. So, for instance, you might wonder, why is my teenager not a bit more susceptible to their body odor? Because let's be honest, teenagers, they don't just shower less, because but also they sometimes smell a bit more. And the reason why they're less aware of that is because they're less susceptible to body odor. When you get older, you do, but they're more susceptible to fruity smells. So there are interesting differences when it comes to sensitivity to particular kinds of odors. When it comes to culture, of course, that's also an interesting thing, because one thing is when it comes to, it depends when we mean by culture, familiarity. So what are actually the things you encounter quite a lot?
Yeah.
And very often that's connected to food, or at least like the habitat you're in, whether you are, for instance, in a fairly regulated, odor-regulated environment. I mean, when we think, for instance, of Western culture, what I find quite interesting is that we, on the one hand, deodorize and then re-odorize everything. So I found there interesting here.
That's interesting. Now, I'm getting a lot of prodding from my my team to say, let's get on with the experiments, because we have.
I'm sorry, I could talk about this all day. Yes.
No, I want you to talk all evening, but I think people are very keen to get on with this. So we asked people to bring a hand sanitizer with them, or some soap, and I want you to smell it, if you would, just smell your hand sanitizer. And then I think we have a poll that we can put up that we want to ask you. So if we can put up this poll, please. So do you like the smell of the hand sanitizer, or do you just buy it because it's functional? We're supposed to have them at the moment and use them. Do you like the smell, or do you not like the smell? Is it just functional? I just pick one or use one because I have to, or are you not sure? So let's have answers to those now. People can start to do it. So I'll just tell you my hand sanitizer, because I'm very fussy about it. It does smell of alcohol, good. And because of the alcohol and the slight botanicals, it's very much like a gin and tonic. And I know there are gin companies who started making hand sanitizers during the pandemic, but I can find one not made by a gin producer, but still has that smell. So people, if they would fill in the questionnaire now. If you can't smell, that will be difficult, of course, but it's not impossible that you get something. So for people with no sense of smell, you sometimes, if it's alcohol, you sometimes get those tingling, burning sensations, little tingling, slight burn on the inside nasal linings, because that's not your sense of smell, that's the trigeminal nerve, the one that serves the eyes, the nose, and the mouth. It rings bells when you have chili and or wasabi and mustard, you feel it there. So sometimes you get a little bit of trigeminal hit, even if there's no smell associated with it. So look at that. 49% like the smell, 20% don't like the smell, and 20% think it's just functional, 5% unsure. So equally, many people don't like or use it functionally as choose it. So I'm wondering why we don't have, why we don't use our preferences. Why isn't it rather like perfume?
Well, but Barry, if you go into a shop to buy a hand sanitizing gel, you can't really pick up the stuff and open it and smell it. So you don't know what you're getting.
Yeah, and I've been in stores recently where they insist that you use hand sanitizer, and it's awful. And I smell of cinnamon for the rest of the day, even though I'm scrubbing and scrubbing. Please don't do that. Please don't do that. Now, we asked people to bring a piece of citrus fruit. I've brought a slice of lemon, and I'm going to just saw a little bit off it. So it's absolutely fresh. Maybe even give it a little squeeze and you can feel the little bits of liquid on, or tiny droplets on your face. So when you smell it, Anne, you're smelling too.
Yeah, I had to cut it first.
Yeah. So
Ooh.
what does it smell like to you? You've got an orange there, I think. What does your orange smell
Well,
like?
you said citrus, and I ate all my lemons because I did a hot lemon.
So I think I want to know, I'm interested, we don't have a poll for this, but I'm interested if people think it smells sour, or if they brought an orange, whether they say it smells sweet.
Sweet.
Because the weird thing would be to say that sweet and sour are not smells, they're tastes. So Anne, why do people want to say this smells sour and an orange smells sweet?
Well, it's partly, of course, the association. And since you talked about earlier with the jelly bean, about the fact that we do often confuse flavors and smells with taste, this is the reverse role. So you did the experiment to show that a lot of what you call taste is actually smell. And this is kind of the reverse thing. Sometimes we do describe smells in taste terms and we associate that, of course. And so there's an interesting way, of course, to think about to what extent do we really, when we acquire our terminology for sensory modalities, it's actually much more influenced by the cross-modal acquisition of knowledge rather than just this is the smell and this is the taste, because of course there is, when you smell it, a form of association with sweetness, and that feels sweet, but it's not sweet as in a taste.
Yeah, and I think it's interesting that people often say of a wine, say smells fruity, and we have to remember there can be fruity sweet and fruity sour. There can be cherry that's tart and sour, or cherry that's sweet, and the smell may not indicate which of those it is. So sometimes something you think smells one way, but when you actually start eating or drinking, you're quite surprised by what you get. The nose was not a good guide. So I'm going to now ask for the last prop, which is something from the spice rack. Now, when you take something from the spice rack, you're probably activating that trigeminal nerve, because a lot of spices, they do irritate the nerve endings and give you that tingle that spices can give you, the cooling or burning sensation of mint or of mustard. Now, I have got my own. I'm not going to show you, but I thought people could try, if this works, people can try this with their friends at home. When you're bored and you don't want to do any more pub quizzes, but you want to use your sense of smell, try what we're going to try now. So I have got, like a beetle in a box, I've got an odor here of a spice, and I'm going to try, without using the word for it, to describe it and see if Chrissi or Anne can figure out what it is. So
Spice charades.
It's smell charade, spice charade. So this is, in some sense, minty, and in some sense, licorice-like. Is that a good clue?
Caraway? No.
Good attempt, because caraway has a kind of mintiness.
Yeah.
Right, and yeah, you get carvone, the very same molecule, the right and the left-handed version of it can smell of caraway or can smell of peppermint.
You said minty and
Minty and licoricey.
okay, so that might be fennel seed.
You're very close now. You're in the zone, because fennel has got that aniseedy note, and this is definitely in the same family. So that's where we get that licorice-like quality, but it's also got that high note, that kind of lifted high note.
I always sucked at charades. I don't know why.
Okay, I'm going to give you the visual clue. It shows you how hard this is to do.
Oh, anise.
Oh,
Star anise.
Star anise, there you are. But I think there might be easier versions, but I thought it was fun. If any of you want to try that at home, please do give it a go with each other and report back. I'd love to know if we can build up smell charades. Now, we've talked a lot about the pleasures, the wonders of smell. We've talked about some of the science behind smell. We've talked about loss of smell. And of course, we have to acknowledge some people may never regain their sense of smell when they lose it, and that can be quite profound for people. We might try to think then of ways of making food interesting and enjoyable, and talk about things that could substitute. But it is interesting, if you lose your sense of smell, and as we get old, remember, all of us will start to have a diminished sense of smell. All of our senses will dim. Our eyesight seems to dim, where our hearing's not as good, so our sense of smell will go down. And unlike the glasses or the hearing aid, there is no substitute. There's nothing we can use to boost it except exercising it by smell training. So it's a use it or lose it sense, and we should definitely try to do that. Now, we've got time for questions, and many of you have been putting things into the Q&A, but please do add any more that you have. Ann-Sophie is an unstoppable treasure trove of fabulously interesting facts and explanations about smell. And
more unstoppable than the rest, but yes.
And Chrissi has enormous number of people who contact her regularly to relay their conditions, to find out more, and we hope to participate in research, because the COVID-19 crisis and COVID-19's relation to loss of smell has made it less Cinderella. We're realizing now that smell is important to look at and to understand. We want to know why there's a kind of upsurge in it with this virus, and then we want to know what happens to people afterwards. So research is being directed at that now, and all of us have been involved in it. So Diana asks, why does parosmia fluctuate so much? Chrissi.
This is a very interesting aspect of COVID-19 smell loss, are the fluctuations. We get so many people who come in first reporting that they didn't actually start experiencing parosmia for some months after they had the virus. So that came as a surprise. And then what starts happening is that they will have the terrible parosmia, then they'll have nothing, then their sense of smell will sort of wake up again, then it will diminish. So we don't quite understand what this means. The theory is that it is inflammation related. So if there's congestion up high in the olfactory cleft, this might be hindering the smell messages from getting through. Again, COVID-19 smell loss is probably a slightly different animal to, or some of the cases will be slightly different from normal post-viral olfactory loss. And we won't know, we won't be able to answer you, anonymous attendee, until more research has been done. But rest assured, you are not alone. That's very typical.
Good. And one for Anne, I think. The more I smell lemon, the better it smells. If you smell something for longer, does it become more complex?
It actually does. So lots of things happening. The more you smell something, the more familiar you get with the smell. One thing what happens is you lower your threshold. So familiarity really allows you to detect certain smells at lower concentrations. The other thing is that people who smell something for longer start to find it more pleasant until it's like too long, and it can sometimes become unpleasant. So there is a relation between length of time of smelling something and the shift between hedonic evaluation. And also, yes, the longer you smell something, the more complex it gets. And that's one of the things why smell is so hard to study, by the way. So you can tell that I love this question, because if you smell something for long, a lot of the things you smell, it's not just simply one molecule, it's hundreds of molecules. So coffee has about 800, even potato or rice smell is like a bit over 100 aromatic volatiles. So you actually have a mixture you're perceiving, and mixtures are extremely complex, hundreds of molecules, thousands and thousands of features. So you have receptors in your nose that adapt and habituate to certain smells, but at different speeds. So the same thing will smell different if you just constantly smell it, because some are going silent, some of the receptors are going like, okay, I know what this is, just leave me alone. And others then become more prominent. So this is why I said like the biology is so important. And this is why the same thing, if you smell it long enough, really smells different, which for science is a problem, because you can't expose people for too long to something, because it will smell different to them. So the evaluation will basically change as well. So how do you measure and standardize things again?
Great, thank you. Baz Gross, who's done a Being Human event on smell, snick slumping, which is always hard to say. It was a wonderful event that we did a couple of years ago in the Black Country. Says, what do you think lockdown's doing to our sense of smell? Will the sense of smell be more homely? Now, we should say that there is this funny thing that we adapt to our surroundings quickly with our sense of smell. So we tend to say, everybody else's home's got a smell, but our home doesn't have a smell. You're not aware of the smell of your own home unless you've been out of it for a long time and come back and then, oh, that's how it smells. So what do you think it's doing to us? I'm going to throw several questions and you can pick the ones you want. I have a weak sense of smell. Somebody asks, how can I make it stronger? And Debbie says, I love the smell of coffee, don't like the taste. Is there an explanation for that? So take it as you wish, whichever one you want to do first. Well, let's do the homely one. How's our sense of smell changing because we're stuck indoors and at home at the moment?
I gotta say, I love that question. Chrissy, interrupt me at any time because you know I talk a
Go
lot.
ahead. This is
But I love that. I love that question because I noticed, as you say, like on the one hand, we habituate quite quickly to our own home, but over lockdown, because I took this seriously, I stayed at home and I was going almost mental, and I noticed that I got more sensitive to smells. So I brewed some coffee and it was at the other end of my flat and I was in the shower and I was like, what is burning here? Because I have a very crappy coffee machine, so it burns the whole thing. And I noticed just how sensitive I was to every kind of change in the environment. So this is something smell is about. It's about change in the environment, sometimes the smallest concentrational changes, because it means something to the organism. And also you notice it yourself when you have a mask on and you go outside, and then you take the mask off and it hits you.
Things come up again. So I'm going to deal with the coffee one, and then I'm going to hand to Chrissy for can I make my sense of smell stronger. So in coffee, the smell of coffee breathed in orthonasally, as we say, from the outside in, when you breathe it in through the nose, those molecules behave differently and are treated by the brain slightly differently, project to slightly different areas when those aroma molecules go from the mouth to the nose and back out again. And there's often a mismatch. So coffee smells wonderful when it's being brewed, but you're also a little disappointed when you drink it. Plus, you're then getting the component of bitterness from the tongue, taste, combined with that. Plus, saliva will strip off 300 of the 800 or so volatiles that are in coffee. So there's always a mismatch between smelling it on the outside and how it's perceived from the inside. And that's why we wake up and smell the coffee. We don't wake up and taste it. Chrissy, can we improve our sense of smell? Can we make it stronger?
Yes, you can improve your sense of smell by smell training. So it's as simple as I explained earlier. If you want more advice on smell training, just go onto our website. It's not difficult to do. Anyone can do it. You can make your own kit and you can really improve your sense of smell.
Great. People are asking, can hot curries shock your sense of smell into numbness? No. It's a different system. The spicy burning is the trigeminal nerve, not the same as the receptors in the nose. People often think you can't drink, decent wines with curry because, it'll interfere. Doesn't. Different system. It's just that you're so terribly aware of the burning, you're not paying attention to what you're getting from the nose. There are lots of people talking about the loss and the things that they've had. Smell memory, yes. The reason we think that smell has this connection with memory, especially with emotional memory, is because your olfactory receptors go to into the olfactory bulb in the brain and then to the piriform cortex, and that projects to the amygdala and the entorhinal cortex. It doesn't go round the hypothalamus as all the other senses are gated by the hypothalamus. So it has this direct connection to a center for arousal, memory, and an emotional response. And we think that's why odors, especially when you're young, they leave this trace of their connection to the emotions, and then sometimes just smelling something you haven't smelt since you're young can trigger those emotions as well. So smell and memory, terribly important. We have to wrap it up there now because we've come very fast to the end of our time and end of our hour here. And before I thank our speakers, I wanted just to thank all of you for watching and attending, and also to say it would help us tremendously in being able to talk about the festival and why it matters and why people are participating and enjoying. If you would fill in the evaluation form, I know that can sometimes be a drag, but it would be much appreciated if you do that. Being Human Festival is on until the 22nd of November. Lots of events you can still attend online. So please do look at the festival website for things that you would like to do. I'd like to thank the technical team and the Being Human organizers for making it possible for us to get together and to do this. I want to encourage you all to use your sense of smell more, to return to your senses. There are many others to try, but while you're cut off from any of the other things we usually do, pay attention to what's going on with you, and take a little moment to give special attention to your sense of smell. So it just leaves me to thank my two speakers for this evening, Chrissi Kelly from AbScent. Thank you very much for talking.
Thank you, Barry. Thank you so much.
And to Ann-Sophie Barwich in Indiana. Thank you for coming along and sharing your passion, your knowledge, and your enthusiasm for smell. And remember, Anne's book, Smellosophy, out now in all good bookshops and can be ordered online, and I hope you will. And
also available as an audiobook.
Also available as an audiobook.
Yes.
I didn't read it, so in case you were like, oh, for heaven's sake, that's over in 10 minutes. But thank you very much, Barry. Chrissi, good to see you.
Very nice, and thank you all, and keep well, keep safe, and we'll see you, I hope, next year at the Being Human Festival. Good night now.
Good night.
Bye.